So,
Stay on. Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Great. I am really excited to be here. I've known Jamie for a little bit now. When I met you, you were experimenting with whether or not you should write this book. And I heard your talk and I was like, yes, you should write that book. And a couple of years later, here we are. Amazing. So I want to kind of start off by asking you why. So who are you and why a book on UX strategy?
Okay. Well, I'm not going to talk about who I am because I feel like I did a pretty good job. And you can always look me up on the internet if you're curious. But I've been working building products for 25 plus years. I think I started in 1990, before the internet, and was doing new media. And fortunately, by 1993, I got to start teaching at NYU, where I got my graduate degree. And from teaching in the last 20 years, interface design, and UI and UX, and all this stuff they call it, I started putting together quite a bit of lectures and stories and templates and stuff like that I really wanted to put together into one place. And then when it came time to getting close to turn 50, I decided it was time to put it all into a publishing medium that might be gone in 10 years, and so I decided to write a book. And it was insane, but I needed to get all these thoughts out into one place. And the book on UX strategy was because I wasn't interested in writing a book on UX design. UX strategy is the intersection of UX design and business strategy, and why are we making products that nobody wants and that don't make any money. I got kind of tired of making those. So I wanted to write a book that really focused more on business strategy and how to go about getting buy-in from whether it's stakeholders and from future customers.
Yeah, awesome. I'm wondering if you want to elaborate a little more on this definition, because as you said, correct, UX design, UI design, information architecture, interaction design, so many things. And here we have another one. So, UX strategy, what does it really mean to you?
Well, those other words are variations of, UI design, doing screen design and making it interactive, having animation, graphics, whatever it is to engage people. But strategy is more focused on business and achieving business goals. And so, the definition or the framework that I came up with, because when you write a book, I learned you have to actually have some kind of framework you put out there, and a lot of people put these crazy frameworks that have like 8 Venn diagrams with 8 circles, and I thought I could consolidate it into 4. And so the 4 tenets that I came up with was validated user research, plus business strategy, plus value innovation, plus killer UX equals UX strategy. And if that sounds like a lot of buzzwords, it's because it is. And so I break them all down throughout the book to try to explain how to go about in your process that you can make killer products that are innovative, that are tested on users and validated and wanted by the marketplace. And ultimately deliver an experience that changes the world. A couple examples of disruptive products that I talk about in the book that I think are incredible would be Uber and Airbnb, just 2 examples that have completely changed our lives, especially in LA, for getting around and allowing us to go stay all over the world for cheaper prices than a hotel, and allow someone like me to make money by renting out my own home while I was writing the book. And Uber allows all kinds of people to get jobs, and it's this offline/online experience that really changes lives. And as soon as my mom starts using these products and my dad takes an Uber to the airport, I know that these products have you know, reach the point where they're so usable that they can actually change the world. So we as UX designers, it's our duty, I believe, to make products that our parents can use, our kids can use, that really make life better.
Awesome. You made a comment about there being a lot of buzzwords, and it's okay. I break them down in the book, and I wanted to just comment on something that I really enjoyed about it, which was that it's simultaneously defining this thing at a high level in a very concise way, but then systematically saying, here's how you do it, which is lacking in a lot of books about UX, especially those ones that try to achieve that level of definition. I also noticed that there's a lot of personal stories and business cases in the book. Can you talk a little bit about why that is?
Well, why don't we give an example maybe of one?
Okay.
Just real quickly, yeah, I was a how-to book that I've used, at UCLA Extension for years, do lectures, and now I teach at USC, and it's hooray, of course, textbook. But writing a how-to book is boring. Like just writing another technical book or straight up UX book or writing even another pop business book. Like does the world really need another one of these boring textbooks? I don't think so. So I wanted to write something that was more personal. And so I wanted to write something that included stories about myself and my awesome family and crazy startups that I've worked with over the last 10 years. But I'm not a writer. I know that, I'm not.
You wrote a book and everything, but...
I know, I read this book, but I didn't quite write it completely. I had the help of an incredible editor who I'd like to bring up, Sarah Zita. Sarah? Sarah was student in my UCLA extension course, and we don't have a chair for her, but maybe we can she'll sit there. And Mike? You break the light. And what?
Yeah.
Oh, there. Here. You just go sit Scott. And she announced that she was taking this UX design class while she just finished her master's in writing. Started. And immediately I was like, that's the person that's going to teach me how to write the book. So we'll probably fix this in a second. There we go. So why don't we illustrate a little bit of what we tried to do with the book, with Sarah's help, to make it more interesting. Yeah.
One of those stories?
Yeah. Do you need a book?
It's...
Oh, you don't need it. You're good.
I think so.
Okay. By the way, we didn't rehearse this.
Oh, we're going to act it out.
We are.
This is a real story from...
A real story that we're acting out.
All right.
I remember where this starts. Do I need to set it up? Page 38. I can just jump into this. I don't need context, right?
It looks like this is a tale from the trenches, right?
This is an actual true story. Everything in here is true. I try to fly. The blockbuster value proposition. When I was in the 8th grade, I used to pretend I had a stomachache so my mom would take me to work with her. She was a legal secretary at Burbank Studios, and I loved wandering in the back lots, hiding on sets, and watching crews shoot television shows and movies. Once, I even had a chance to meet Ricardo Montalban on the set of Fantasy Island. The younger me of 1978 just couldn't imagine a cooler job. And that's why the older me of 2012 was particularly excited when a blockbuster movie producer arranged a meeting with me at a bungalow on the same lot. He wanted to consult with me on an idea he had for a product to see if it had legs.
Fade in. Exterior bungalow, morning. The shot starts long and then pans up through the window of the bungalow. Cut to interior bungalow, morning. A production assistant leads our UX strategist, Jamie, into the room. The movie producer, Paul, is seated behind his desk. He stands up to greet her. They shake hands and settle into their seat. The assistant leaves the room.
So I have an idea for an e-commerce site, and I'm hoping you can help me with it.
Let's hear it.
It's like Amazon.com wish list for this busy man who needs help shopping for his wardrobe.
Oh, can you tell me more about this busy man?
Paul gets really excited. He leans forward and gesticulates a lot while describing the busy man.
He's this guy whose life is his work. He makes good money, but he doesn't have the time to spend it. He loves buying products, but hates shopping for them. He's sick of repeating himself to salespeople, but still wants to get the VIP treatment.
Jamie leans forward, hands resting on her knees. She takes a beat before speaking.
That's very specific. But do you think this is a problem for most busy men? Do you think they need it solved?
Absolutely. I certainly do.
And
In Los Angeles, it's easy to run into both Hollywood types who pitch movie ideas and tech entrepreneurs who pitch internet product ideas. What's funny is how similar they are. Both want to create something original and compelling that makes lots of money. Both need to raise a ton of cash to make their ideas into reality. But this requires spinning a good story in order to convince potential stakeholders and investors that there is an audience out there who will want the idea. Most investors know that the odds are not in their favor because the market is constantly being inundated with schlock, crappy movies and crappy apps. Then again, when something is truly great, the payoff can be major, and not just in terms of the money. Having a hit is also what gives us fulfillment as content and product creators. We want to create something that people will find useful and meaningful, something maybe even our moms will like. However, there is one major difference between making movies and making digital products. With films, regardless of the strategy, casting big-name actors, sequels to board games, well-worn plots and tropes, there are hardly any opportunities in the process of making the film to de-risk it through empirical feedback. Sure, filmmakers can test early cuts on their target markets, but typically at that point, reshooting is an affordable option. With digital products, you can test market your concepts and your target audiences much earlier and with much less fidelity to the intended idea. You can reality check your team and ensure that everyone is on the right path. There is no reason to live on Fantasy Island unless you enjoy the risks of big gambling. Lessons learned. 1, just because your stakeholders or you really want your product doesn't mean anybody else will. Most startups fail because the market doesn't necessarily need the product. 2, you need to ground your stakeholders and team in reality with comparable evidence. You must turn your assumptions into facts. 3, don't take what your stakeholders or teams say at face value. To learn what potential customers want, cut them down in person. Thank you.
When I read the book, by the way, seeing a film script format in the UX book was definitely a first for me. And any of you who know Jamie personally know how good of a sense of humor he has, and that comes across in the book, obviously. So there's a lot of stories like this, and I get the sense that some of these lessons are hard learned over the years. Can you talk a little bit about how your methodology has evolved?
Let me think. So when I started doing UX strategy as a profession, this was about 7 or 8 years ago, it was called the UX discovery phase. And the typical way that it worked was, certainly in an agency environment, was that they would have us, fly out, build stakeholders, interview them, come back, create personas, speak the value matrices, create the concept maps, and then turn in a brief, and then they would look at it and say, okay, make wireframes now. And I thought it was bullshit, It was just bullshit. And the whole idea of doing this entire strategy phase and not taking these ideas and actually going out and talking to the users to see if they actually wanted the idea was bullshit, and not testing it to make sure that the it would be demanded in a way that they would actually pay for it. And so I didn't quite know how to contend with that feeling of knowing that I was a fraud, but then I read this book called Lean Startup, and that really, it took Steve Blank's methodology around customer development and going out and talking to customers and around validation that transformed the way I practice UX strategy, which is, it's absolutely crucial that you do experiments, you figure out what the idea is, you get it out in front of a customer, and you make sure they actually will give you money for it or that somebody else will before building a full-on product. And so that was probably the most transformative thing.
Awesome. So I'm curious how this influence, this lean startup influence, may have affected how you approach the book itself. Can you MVP a book?
Yes, you can MVP a book. And I actually learned it from Ash Maurya. I didn't invent this, I stole it from him and made it better, hopefully. What I read in his book, he after Lean Startup came out, he wrote a book, I don't remember the name, Running Lean, great book. And he's based in Texas. And he was talking about before he wrote his book that he went out and did lectures to see if people were actually interested in the subject matter. And I was writing this proposal about UX strategy and trying to like get a book deal. And I needed to prove to them that I actually had an idea that people wanted UX strategy, wanted to know about it. And so I did a lecture in LA, in Santa Monica, and some people here that were there and sold it out, which took quite a bit of growth hacking, and got to see the reaction to, the first time I kind of put my framework out there and business cases out there, and my dad knows it was, it was a little off my head. I'm not going to teach that until 45. Lessons learned. But I'm going to tell jokes about my horrible dating life. But that was the first, I sold it out, and I then went and toured it through England and showed that there was audience abroad. And then I pitched it to O'Reilly, and they were like, yeah, we'll give you a book deal. And then it took me so long to knock out that first chapter or two. They were like, they wanted to put a fire under my butt. And so they had this awesome program. I can't recommend O'Reilly or O'Reilly Media as a publisher. They were just awesome. They're the animal books here. And what they have was a program that's called Early Release, where they allow you, they start putting the chapters up, raw and unedited, onto the website for people to download. So my book has been up there for over 9 months. I sold more copies, I don't want to brag, but I did sell more copies in like 6 months. The first 6 months I would have even sold with my first choice publisher, and it would have come out 3 years later in total. So they were basically testing, getting it out there, and no one gave me any feedback. After they sold 1,000 copies, I'm like, well, how do I know it doesn't suck? And they're like, well, people tell us when it sucks. And enough people are out there reading it that they'll tell you. And so that, getting it out there and not just like sitting in that library is great. And then getting feedback from the community in LA, and also teaching it at UCLA Extension and then at USC really gave me the opportunity to road test the material and make sure that, that it was on target and that it made sense. If I had just written the book the old-fashioned way and said, we'll see what we'll see, I don't know if it would have been sold.
Yeah. Awesome. I want to kind of switch gears to your work, the work that inspired the book. I know a little bit about your career trajectory, and something that's happened fairly recently is a shift from more enterprise-type finance to startups. So I'm curious why that is, and how you feel about working with startups.
Yeah, it's definitely intentional. I mean, I worked a lot with enterprises. I worked for Cisco Systems as a UX strategist. I worked at IBM back in the day, and then I worked with a lot of trendy agencies. But the biggest risk takers out there are startups. They're these entrepreneurs, these startup founders walking around that have this idea, and they're like, I got this idea for a product, and they're going out and pitching it, and they're trying to make it at hackathons, and they're insane. And they just like have this like life force that is just so exciting to be with. And I got to work with two incredible startups that I talk about in this book. One of them is called Book Your Pair, and one of them is called Tradia. And Book Your Pair, the CEO can be here tonight because she doesn't drive on Shabbat. But he had an idea to build a matching, basically a website that could, people who need, drug rehabilitation, alcohol rehabilitation with drug treatment centers that weren't bogus. And when he reached out to me initially, I was like, I don't really want to go near that drug stuff, sounds a little crazy. But he had the son who had just come out of rehab and kept bouncing between rehabs, and he was a very successful software entrepreneur. And he's like, look, I'm going to give you a blank check, and you can go out and do all these crazy experiments you're writing about. And that was really, really amazing. So we got to do early user research, we got to do landing page tests, and Sarah worked on all these business cases. And that, he's like the greatest guy. And then another awesome startup I worked with was Tradia, and that was for quite a while. And Jared's up in SF. And again, he let me assemble a lean UX apprentice program. He let us create constant MVPs and test it. We just pivoted so much, I finally had to fire him. But it was this opportunity to try out different ways of approaching product strategy and testing it that I would never have gotten if I just stayed at Cisco. I mean, that's good money and stuff. I mean, I'd be happy if they want to give me more, but ultimately, if you really want the most freedom to make the most, do the most craziest products and make that next Airbnb, then you got to work with startups.
Awesome. Where do you think you got this interest in entrepreneurs and startups in the first place?
There's my beautiful son right there. Well, I have to say that I got it from both my parents. If I could get my mom and my dad to just stand up and turn around and say hi. That's my mom. And in the book, I talk about them ad nauseum. They probably don't understand why, because it's a rebel, but they, as a child, and my brother can attest to this, Darren Levy right there, product strategist. They raised two product makers in the same house without even trying. And basically, I think we had different trajectories, but what we got to watch from a young age, and I will get into this, is I got to watch my mom start a business out of our house. I'm going to talk about it a little bit. And I got to watch my dad open up the hot dog stand. And he's smirking as he doesn't want me to talk about it. I got to watch both my parents start businesses and succeed and fail and come back and bounce back and start careers again. My dad became a very successful CEO, and I know that part of him getting to become a successful CEO is from failing. Maybe a little?
Absolutely right. You fail your way to success.
And so I watched my parents work really hard and take risks and fail, and then ultimately succeed. And that gave me incredible freedom and permission, I think, as a young child, to know that I could go out and take risks with my own career. And not always do the right thing, but just always keep trying, because we could always reinvent ourselves.
So there's some good stories from them in the book.
If it's okay, can I read a 5-minute story of one of these? All right. This is the intro, and believe me, there's lots of boring, straight-up stuff about UX design. It's not just stories about my family, okay? This is from the 7th chapter. About going out and creating experiments. And page 6. There we go. Sorry. Oh, thank you. All right, here we go. All right. Well, this one's a chapter called Creating Prototypes for Experiments. I'll do a couple little, let me jump around really fast to get through this quickly, but creating prototypes for experiments. The premature outlay of huge amounts of money in pursuit of the wrong strategy is the thing to avoid. You need to have an experimental mindset. Clayton Christensen. A successful UX strategy needs this continuous testing to ensure that your product will deliver a solution that people will really, really want. Thus, you need to jump from your storyboard to an MVP or prototype of your product. You'll then take it into a small, structured, lean experiments to learn as soon as possible if your team's latest assumptions are on the right track, and to force you to confront the reality of what it would actually take to make your business model work in the real world. This kickstarts the process of blending the ingredients that make all 4 tenets of my UX strategy framework. Each picture of plates on the table. Giving it your best shot. My dad was really successful. I'm going to say this one statement here, okay? Or he is at least. Years before my dad bought the doomed hot dog stand I discussed in chapter 4, I watched my mom start and run a successful business out of her bedroom closet of her San Fernando Valley home. It was the early 1970s, and my mom, age 35, fell hard for the sport of tennis. This was the decade of tennis in the United States. Its popularity was fueled by the television championships at Wimbledon, as well as the US Open and the French Open, with competitors like John Hugo, Ken Rosewall, and Chris Everett. Sorry about that.
You almost have to memorize.
I know, it's crazy. It's like I wrote it in my mind. Backyard tennis courts, country clubs with strong tennis programs and tournaments popped up all across the country. In sunny Southern California, tennis became an integral part of the upper middle class lifestyle. While I attended elementary school, my mom dragged my little brother and his playpen to the local park where she took lessons. She was a natural who developed a powerful slice return. And 6 months after starting lessons, she won her first ladies double tournament trophy. A picture of her by her swing set. It didn't take long before my mom began to look beyond the game. One day, while having lunch with her doubles partner, Lee, inspiration struck. The friends loved all aspects about the sport on and off the court, but both agreed that it was also impossible to find reasonably priced tennis clothes. A competitive audit of discount clothing stores in Los Angeles assured the woman they had stumbled on a blue ocean. They had found themselves a value proposition. They each had $500 to invest. Neither of them had any retail experience. Lee knew how to do bookkeeping. My mom had only worked as a legal secretary and never attended college. But my mother was a hustler. She suggested that they experiment with the value proposition by doing a trial run. She reached out to a family friend to see if he could help them acquire some product. He worked in the schmata rag business and knew his way around downtown Los Angeles clothing manufacturers. He also knew the movie star Elfie Summer, who agreed to sell the new business partners some of her tennis clothing line at just over cost. With 4 dresses, 10 pastel skirts, and 12 bras, my mom and Lee just needed to find some customers. They first started trying to acquire customers at the tennis courts, where they showed off their wares to the trunk of my mom's Chevy Nova. But people really needed a private place to try things on. So they obtained local club lists with names and numbers of players they could schmooze into coming over to their homes. I remember coming home from school to find dozens of half-naked women parading around my mom's bedroom while she urged them to try different styles. Then my mom and Lee were even invited to be part of a charity in Beverly Hills home. They trekked their clothes to this local customer segment where they sold the product in a pop-up dressing room in the mansion's garage. These experiments eventually made them a rousing success. Their entrepreneurial scheme was even featured as one of the 10 biggest bargains in LA in LA Magazine. Within the first year, they built up $10,000 of inventory and a customer base from all over, including Beverly Hills, Ojai, and Pacific Palisades. It was time to scale from the bedroom closet to a brick-and-mortar location on Ventura Boulevard. Love Match Tennis Shop was born. The Businesses break even from the start, and my mom and Lee typically reinvested any profits back into purchasing more inventory. They enjoyed the discretionary income and the flexible schedule that let them raise their young children and also play tennis. After 3 years, they moved the store into a space 3 times the size in a new shopping mall. Love Match Tennis Shop continued its success, but after almost 10 years, my mom decided to move on. Lee bought out a share for an amount that they both agreed to spare, in accordance with the etiquette demonstrated at the end of a proper tennis match. They shook hands and thus concluded the business partnership. Lessons learned. They're really the lessons I learned. 1, you do not need an MBA or even a college education to start a business and for it to be successful. You do need to be a go-getter. 2, start small. If you have a big idea, figure out a way to trial it. Manage risk by taking action. Place small bets fast. 3, stay in a partnership for as long as you have the stamina to pull your weight. But when it's over, leave gracefully and with a handshake.
Oh, there's the one. Awesome. So, you and I have something in common, San Fernando Valley.
No way.
Yeah, that's where I'm from.
Oh my God.
I'm not going to do it. But yes, that's, of course, when I was a Valley girl, that's how I spoke as well. And, you know, come to think of it, all the examples in the book are LA companies. So, and you spent a good part of your career. You were in San Francisco, you were in New York for almost 20 years, but you came back to LA, you wrote a book that's really LA-centric. What does it mean? I mean, what is your relationship with LA? Why LA?
Yeah, that is true. I hated LA. I hated the Valley. That was all I knew. And when I was 18, I had to go and do my own thing, go to SF, and live in San Francisco, and then eventually go to New York. And I loved being in New York and the vitality of the city. But ultimately, it felt a lot like about careerism there. And I forgot about like doing other important things in my life, like having a family. And then this horrible thing, we had a couple bad things. One, the dot-com bubble burst, followed up by 9/11. And I thought, that's it. I lost everything. I lost my business. I mean, everyone lost their business, so there was just no work. But I came back to LA because my family's here. And I came back to LA because it seemed like where I would want to have a kid, which I was lucky enough to do. Terry, you here somewhere? Terry, come on up and say hi. And I just couldn't imagine, here, sweetheart, having, it's great. So we have this great house in South Pasadena, and we have this pretty mellow life that's beautiful, and you can walk to school and have a similar life to what we had in the Valley. And you know, I don't know if I could have figured that out in New York and San Francisco. It would have been really expensive. And I also feel like SF is so tech-centric. You know, it's just like tech. If you go to a cafe and everyone's a UX designer, it's like, get away from me. I'm just trying to be original. You know, and New York's just like New York. We love New York, but you know, you have to be a millionaire. We're going to go there. And so my family's here. And so I love LA because, you know, this is like a great place to live. There's amazing people from all different walks of life here. And we have a little bit of space, I mean, you know, and it is a bit more affordable than these other big tech centers. And I feel like we have enough breathing room where we can actually think long enough to figure out the right products without being like uber incentivized by making money or corrupted by trends. And I don't know, I love it here, and I'm really, really proud that I get to live in such a great city and work with startups and teach at the greatest schools and be part of such a great UX scene. The UX, LA UX Meetup has 3,000 plus members, and it's awesome UX scene, and you know, people are just like so supportive here. It's not like backstabby, you know. I mean, it's just a great team. I love LA. I love my son Terry, and so.
Hi.
Awesome. So to kind of wind things down, I get the sense, you know, you've had an awesome career. You've been involved in the creation of a lot of different things. You've written this book. I get the sense that there's some slightly other motivation when you talk about the work we do. You talk about it as if it's really, there's something substantial there. And I don't know if it's the power to create or if it's, I don't know what it is, but basically I want to ask, what is this thing really about? Like really about?
Really about. So the book is, I try to think about it. People who don't know what the hell X stands for, we're like, what is this X thing? And what X is about is problem solving. What we're supposed to do, I believe, as designers and product strategists, is solve problems, not come up with solutions that are genius like our fabulous Hollywood producer, but actually come up with ways that can improve other people's lives. And we have this power, and I'm not trying to sound like some, you know, crazy culty freak. I actually do believe this as a culty freak spirit, which is that as product designers, we have the capability to pretty much make anything that we want. We have open source tools. It's not very expensive to buy hosting. We can build landing pages and test products. We can pretty much come up with any idea and get a product out there that we can test with not very much money. And I can't say that about too many other fields. You know, I mean, so many other sectors, you know, film, television, writing, theater, you know, dance, you know, they're barely surviving. There's my wonderful ballet teacher there, and they're barely surviving a lot of these other art forms and a lot of other industries. But user experience, as we know, there's a lot of newbies here are coming over here because it's like, wow, I can be left brain, right brain, I can be a designer, and I can be a technologist. There's just so much opportunity to really create real stuff, and so I'm trying to advocate with this book that we not just like think about it as an easy way to make money, although it can be sometimes. It's also an opportunity to make really killer products that improve people's lives. And I think that all is about like getting in front of customers and you know, really finding big opportunities, not solving, you know, headache problems, but like broken leg problems, big problems.
Awesome. Is that why you end with the niche quote?
Yeah, the niche quote. Yeah, because I identify as existentialism, and I believe that life is short and that we're here on Earth for a finite amount of time. And if we're blessed with these skills and we can go make really cool stuff, well, we can go work for the man, sure, when we need money, but we can also try to make stuff that'll make a difference. And if you don't have the lucky opportunity to even work on, you know, a really revolutionary product, because a lot of us do have to support our families and work for the man, then at least try to work with people that are amazing to work with. You know, work at companies that you respect. Work on teams that you think are great. Don't just go to a job and sit behind a computer like a dumbass. Don't do that. It's not about just cranking out wireframes. It's not. It's about like trying to make things that really change the world and make it more affordable and that we can have, you know, a better life.
At $24.99.
It was getting pretty deep there, so amazing time. I want to go back to the deepness though, okay? We're getting really philosophical here, so I have a very, very important question. How's the iWatch? Or the Apple Watch?
Oh, this? This thing is stupid. Like, I'm a big sucker that I bought this thing. He wanted it, for a watch, I could go, you know, but as someone who sells herself as a UX strategist, I gotta understand how all these touch points come together. You know, I want to see how the New York Times, to OkCupid, to all these other apps work on a watch and if it would be useful or not. And as it turns out, it's mostly not. And that's why I'm going to put it up for sale on eBay next week.
Carrie, can you tell us how much he's going to sell it for?
3 something. Okay, instead of buying this, you might as well just put some tape and just get some tape and just strap an apple slice just to your arm. Just get a normal watch. There's no use to like Instagram on this.
Yeah,
You can't even see the pictures very well.
exactly. You know, if the price point was $50, I would say, yeah, let's all get these. They're great. You know, you save 2 minutes not having to pull your phone out of your purse. You see it flash across the screen, but I still have to grab my glasses. But, you know, the bottom line, I don't know if this sucks because Steve Jobs was dead before they invented it, or if it sucks just because Apple just can't continue doing incredible innovation. But the bottom line is like, you know, Internet of Things, you know, we got to test out all these products and UX people and know what they can do and understand how they can bring value. And so I own it, I'm using it, and now I want to get rid of it as soon as possible.
They just want to get more products and devices than Android so they can keep up with technology.
It sounds like that's why we need UX strategy. Is there anyone you want to thank?
Yeah, God, there's so many people I'm going to try to thank. I'm going to thank Rhonda and my dad for being an awesome guiding post in my life. And my mom, my dear mom, Rhoda, and Sid, her husband, amazing tennis couple. Is Vita here? The student, or Vita, one of the students portrayed in the book. Let me think. John Lee, who is started out as my tenant, still is, and one of my closest friends. He was part of the book and documentary some of the early user research studies. Sarah, of course, the book wouldn't be here without Sarah. Sarah, is there anyone else here I'm missing? Darren? Yeah, there's Darren. They helped out as well. And, but anyway, I just want to thank everybody here for supporting me. Oh my God, Teacher Phil, my ballet instructor. The dedication man for 5 years has taught me how to stand up straight. And teaching me how to be a lady a little bit. But anybody else who I forgot, I just want to thank you for coming so much and supporting me with this book. It totally means so much to me, and it's like really exciting to do this. It's very terrific.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Does anyone have any questions that they want to share?
Why did you decide UX design? At what point in your career path or life, I guess, did you just decide good UX?
At what point in my career path did I decide? When I was 18, I mean, or 20, I started doing UX. So it wasn't called UX; it was called interface or interactive animation. So I've been doing it my whole life. I really have no second thing.
Okay, what got you hooked? What's the reason?
Non-linear storytelling. I wanted to do something interactive. I originally wanted to be a filmmaker and do storytelling, but then once I saw short formatted TV videos and I saw interactive things coming out in museums, I knew like that was an opportunity for me to do something pushing storytelling forward, but also like with graphics and animation. Because there was no distribution medium back then. It was just more about like creating non-linear experiences. And so I think coming from LA, that as more of a storyteller, that was what drove me into it.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your talk. I was super impressed. I'm totally sold on the book now. You mentioned these two really big disruptive influences, Airbnb and Uber. And, you know, last month there was a ruling here in California. Well, long story short, the idea is that these systems or these products are disruptive, but in what ways are the disruptions good and in what ways are they sort of questionable? So, you know, we're talking about the casualization of labor, having more and more people be independent contractors and not part of the labor laws that, you know, made us successful as a country. You know, where are we finding this balance? Where do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, that's complicated. I don't know. I think it's better to have things change than stay the same. And I just know that the way you would flag taxis or not be able to get taxis in LA and San Francisco didn't work. And it was too expensive. And they had a monopoly, and that was screwed. So I know it's going to even out eventually with Uber and Lyft. And I'm glad that they can pick up at the airport, and you know they'll be safer, and you know prices will even out ultimately, and they'll get disrupted by something else. And then as far as Airbnb, even that's getting kind of messed up with people just renting their homes. It went from renting their homes to just like buying property and renting it out, and not being as so nice as it was, where you'd be in someone else's beautiful home with their art instead of just like some IKEA piece of crap. But, you know, ultimately, you know, from the perspective of the customer and having the freedom to travel the world and stay in other people's places and knowing that you can take an Uber anywhere in the world and what that experience is like is better. It's global. And to me. And so, you know, sometimes we disrupt for better or worse. And I think, you know, the laws, we'll see what happens, how things play out. But in general, I think it's a great opportunity for us all to get around and move around the world in, you know, in a less expensive way.
Hi, Hi, Jamie. My name is Dante. Nice to meet you.
Hi.
Okay, so what is the future of UX? Where are we going? What is the next big thing? That's what I want to know.
Well, you know, the rumor, of course, is that it's all going to be about, you know, connected devices, Internet of Things. You know, like refrigerators can talk to us, and you know, but there are other things that are exciting. You know, whether it's a fancy or not. You know, like the new Hyperloop, whether that materializes or not. You know, this idea of transportation systems that we could like all of a sudden go from LA to San Francisco in 30 minutes. If that happens, that could make our lives so much better. And the experience around some of these new concepts that are beyond just doing interface design, but are about the entire experience strategy, you know, end to end, from, you know, calling it on your iWatch to getting somewhere. I think it's going to move away from the screen, certainly, and we'll see if the screen turns into a piece of paper, you know, or if it's a little thing in our head. But I think as UX designers, we need to just assume that we're going to always have to learn some new thing and adjust to new technologies. It's not going to be easy, and that's why it's awesome, because we always have to be on the bleeding edge of technology, and you know, read a lot of magazines and newspapers and blogs and Twitter, and then just keep your finger on the pulse to know, you know, where things are moving, because it's a moving target.
Hey, hey, Jimmy, first of all, congratulations on the turnout and the success of the book. I know you've been working on it a long time. I know you mentioned that startups are great and you can disrupt and do all this stuff, and you're not going to get a lot of pushback. For those of us that happen to work in enterprise and stuff like that, any pointers on bringing some of these concepts of UX strategy to larger, less nimble organizations?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely challenging, but I think that when you look through the book, you'll see that a lot of the techniques are lightweight, and the idea is that we need to be entrepreneurial and just do them, and not, like, whether our boss buys in or not, we have to do the competitive research, and we need to go ahead and just create rapid prototypes where they get permission and show them around. Like, just sitting around and waiting for someone to tell you something doesn't get you anywhere. I mean, in these enterprises, people who are going to, you know, the risk takers are going to go out and take risks, and they're going to create something on their, you know, in their own time. And as far as socializing it in those enterprises, then you need to, I find the biggest trick is that you need to get other people on board by letting them think that they came up with the idea. Like, if you preach to them and say, oh, I read this book, and you have to do this thing, and you need this thing, like, no, that's not going to do it at all. You want to kind of like send them the link to the toolkit with one line filled out and say, do you think this thing makes any sense? You know, like, you know, and just like kind of ease them into them, like owning the idea themselves, and you know, and trying to, you know, have them watch videos of, you know, that are just like, what is this lean startup? You know, drag the people that you work with to events. Because people typically in enterprises are threatened by change. They just want their simple job and they want to do this thing that they have this title for and not have any risk. And that's understandable, but if you want to be in an environment where they're open to change, then you need to kind of help people go with you. Does that make sense?
Hi, Jamie. Over here.
Hi.
Hi.
Yay.
Congratulations. So you have so much insight into making these businesses happen. Do you have any thoughts of starting your own? You know, putting forth one of your own ideas and focusing on that instead of helping other people do theirs?
Yeah, that's a very funny question. I have made a couple products in my life. One of them was a cartoon series, and I did some electronic disc magazines, but they tend to be content. I'm just like a wuss when it comes to making my own product. I know I'm the person that people come to and say, make me this. You know, for me, the product is a book. You know, this was my startup. I spent, you know, 9 months sitting in a stupid library writing it, not knowing if, I still don't know if I'm going to make money from this book. You know, I don't know what it will lead to, but it was a startup adventure that I had to go on. And I think sometimes we feel like maybe as UX designers, like, oh, I'm not entrepreneurial enough. But I don't think it has to be our own idea. Yeah, I really like solving other people's problems. You know, and I love it, like when I teach all my students, they you know, I don't let them come up with a solution. I'm like, well, what's a big problem you want to solve? And let me help you do that. And I kind of have to accept that I'm not going to potentially be rich from some startup, you know, that's just not who I am, that I'm on the other side of it.
Were there any more questions?
Is it party time? Drink all the wine. Thank you so much.